We're good now. Okay. So thanks, Zach, for that introduction. And again, thank you for the organizing team and Tristan for inviting me here. And obviously, thank you to my wife. Without her support, I wouldn't be here, and there probably wouldn't be a nuclear Bitcoiner. So with that, let's jump right into it. I think we can all agree that everybody deserves access to reliable, affordable, and clean energy resources, especially in Canada's most underserved regions in the north. Yet, despite Canada's abundance, many of these communities still rely on diesel generators to meet their most basic energy needs. It's expensive, it's polluting, and many of them are actually due to be replaced soon anyways. So, as Zach introduced, my name is Ryan MacLeod. I'm a Bitcoiner. I work at the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories as a technologist. Not an engineer, not a physicist, nothing fancy like that. I'm just a Bitcoiner that works in the nuclear industry. And quick disclaimer, ideas are my own. I don't represent the company. So yeah, nuclear and Bitcoin, I definitely chose two of the most misunderstood technologies that are going to have a very positive, profound impact on the future of humanity. And so I'd like to introduce you all to a new technology that is currently under development in Canada and most of the rest of the world that I am very confident will change the trajectory of off-grid energy development in the north, and that is the small modular reactors. Across northern Canada, hundreds of communities and critical industries must burn billions of liters of diesel every year. In these locations, fuel is very expensive, it is polluting to the local environment, wholesale power costs are far greater than areas with grid access, and it can only be delivered in periods of very narrow seasonal windows. If any of you are familiar with the ice roads, that is a very precarious way to ship fuel to the north. And yeah, any failure to operate can lead to emergency conditions. So if they are not getting their fuel resources, it can be a very trying time for these people. And then on top of all of that, these regions suffer from the highest rates of mental health and despair-related illnesses in Canada. So these communities, they deserve better. And what if we actually did have a better solution? Something that is cleaner, something that is more affordable, and something that Canada's actually already good at. So with that, let's look towards nuclear power as a potential alternative and how Bitcoin mining can play a role in amplifying its reach. To start with, up here, nuclear power is the safest and the lowest emitting source of power that we have available to us today, and it by far has the greatest power density. And then, nuclear technology is also critical in the production of medical isotopes and many non-power related applications. So like, how many of you have or know somebody who has had a medical procedure that has used a radiological isotope? Like, yeah, and it probably came from a CANDU reactor as well. So Canada's nuclear sector has a lot to be proud of. We manage the entire nuclear supply chain domestically while proving nuclear power to be a safe and affordable power generating asset for developed regions. And then on the next one, yeah, up here in the top right, that is Chalk River, where Canada's Nuclear Research Laboratory exists. This is where it all began with the first prototype of the CANDU reactor. The other three images are the Bruce, the Pickering, and the Darlington power generating stations. These three power plants alone account for 60% of Ontario's power generation capacity. But if we want to serve nuclear power in smaller markets like off-grid regions in Canada's north, we are going to need something sized more appropriately to meet their needs. And this is where a new class of nuclear reactors, nuclear power plants, has an opportunity to transform our northern energy systems. So Canada's SMR Action Plan was officially launched in late 2020 with the intent to modernize our capabilities and bring nuclear power to markets where our big reactors just cannot go. So Stream 1, we're going to use slightly larger reactors to phase out coal. The advanced reactors, they're going to serve heavy industry, and some of them will be able to recycle spent fuel from the other reactors. But the one that I am the most interested in, and where I think the Bitcoin will have the most impact, is Stream 3, that focuses on the development of small and micro reactors that are tailored to meet the needs of off-grid communities, industries, and military installations, the exact places seeking a suitable alternative to diesel power. And this new class of reactors isn't just smaller, they're safer and they're smarter. They are being designed with passive safety systems that automatically fail into safe state. Some of them will run continuously for as much as 10 years without requiring refueling as a self-contained unit. Vendors will manage refueling, replacing units, and delivering fuel to recycling facilities. And then at projected costs of roughly 200 to 250 megawatts per hour, that may not be competitive on grid, but where diesel can be as much as $1,000 per megawatt hour, they are far more cost effective than diesel in these regions. And then here on the screen, these are all conceptual designs of various prototypes that are under development. In the top left is Westinghouse's eVinci, Oklo's Aurora, Nanonuclear's Zeus and Kronos, the Department of Energy's Project Pele, and Terra Innovatum's Solo X. So as you can see, they're very small and they can be shipped in standard shipping containers for very fast deployment where they're needed the most. And like even examples of like recent emergency situations, if we needed to ship in power quickly, we could do it on the back of the truck and plug it in very quickly and provide power to places in emergency situations. So this all sounds pretty good though, doesn't it? But the challenge that I kept encountering as I was reviewing all of the studies about nuclear energy microgrids was that because the cost of nuclear power is so heavily front-loaded, every megawatt that you can generate early on is disproportionately more valuable. So in order to make them economically feasible, they must be able to immediately sell all of the power, all of the time, in a location where demand for power can vary widely throughout the day and across the seasons. Whether it's just a few megawatts or hundreds, like how do we justify the investment to build more than enough nuclear power to meet these community needs when there is insufficient demand to do so all the time, especially in a evolving and developing microgrid? To make it work optimally, the system planners need an anchor load, a power consumer that possesses a specific set of properties that can make full use of the microreactor's output from day one. Something that can go anywhere, it can be dispatchable and tolerate disruptions, it can be scaled perfectly to meet the community's needs, it has a very high load density, the product is easy to sell to a market, and it's not going to rival essential services. Some proposed technologies like hydrogen electrolysis and synthetic fuel production could work, but they require additional infrastructure and transportation unless they can be used locally, which they will be great once these grids have matured, but in a developing microgrid that's fairly new, that's not going to be useful just yet. And then electric and thermal batteries, they can play a role, but they're just simply arbitraging between periods of high and low demand. So the sizing of the community is still limited to just enough to meet the community's power needs. But now, with Bitcoin available to us, we have what could be described as the perfect companion load to anchor and accompany microreactors to these remote locations. Bitcoin mining exemplifies every one of these properties that system planners are seeking, and where it really stands apart is the non-physical nature of its product. And then as a bonus, they're also a great heat source. Before Bitcoin mining, there were few, if any, pathways to fully monetize stranded power in remote places without major infrastructure costs. Many hydropower plants in the north have actually been shelved for exactly this reason. No local off-taker, no grid tie-in, no project greenlight. But with Bitcoin, you can bring your own customer with you and use it as a virtual grid of sorts. No roads, no wires, no pipelines, just a few mobile data centers converting stranded local power into a globally transferable digital commodity, Satoshis. Mining provides immediate, portable, scalable, and flexible demand that can transform excess capacity into economic momentum. It is the perfect companion to bridge the transition from a developing microgrid into a self-reliant power system with a range of diverse loads and local industries. And like what I'm proposing isn't even that far-fetched. It's already happening in places like Africa. I just want to adopt it to nuclear. Gridless compute is a perfect example where they've partnered with local microgrids in rural locations to monetize their stranded energy and by selling it to the Bitcoin network and then sharing in the revenue. And then the increased revenue allows the local utilities to expand the local grid to more homes and provide better power rates to the residents. Yeah, essentially, I'm suggesting that we adopt this model to facilitate the deployment of a constellation of SMR clusters throughout the north. Because now, With Bitcoin mining serving as a globally accessible market for power, even the most remote power plant can sell its product, electricity, regardless of the local demand for it. And where it really gets exciting is that Bitcoin mining enables and actually encourages local power utilities to overbuild these systems with confidence. And overbuilding is how we build and prepare for the future. Instead of sizing these microgrids based on just enough thinking out of a concern for stranded energy, we can now upsize them boldly, knowing that that power won't ever be wasted. Then as new homes, clinics, schools, water treatment plants emerge, mining can scale down, diverting power towards the community priorities. Or we can add more power. And then with this framework, we can create a foundation for growth and development in the most underserved regions of our great nation. And so why do I care about this stuff so much? Because I believe that it is access to reliable, affordable, and clean energy that is the foundation of autonomy, prosperity, and sovereignty for these communities. The communities that lack these are not just underserved, they're being denied participation in the modern world. That is why it is our responsibility as educators, as industrialists, and policymakers to remove barriers and build partnerships that create the conditions that allow anyone, anywhere to secure the resources that they need to thrive. And through this model, we're doing more than just turning on the lights and giving them power. We're also switching on connectivity and financial sovereignty at the fringes. We can use these technologies to form a feedback loop where we use mining and sound money to amplify the capabilities and the reach of clean energy resources. And with more clean energy resources, we can deploy more hash rate and distribute it more broadly. With more mining, we mint more sound money. And then with more sound money, we support more clean energy, and so on, in establishing a flywheel that remote communities can use to leapfrog the legacy grid, the legacy banking system, and embrace a future where they can own their energy, they can own their data, and they can own their wealth. So in closing, I am confident that what Bitcoin offers us is a pathway to create energy systems that are more just, more resilient, and more sovereign, not just for those on the grid, but for those at the edges of it. Thank you. Now I can breathe. Right on. Thank you. Now where do I go?